Hello and welcome back to the Football Heritage podcast. I'm your host, Rory Rice, and today I'm joined firstly by Robbie Mcilwraith.
Close enough.
Close enough. I always get mixed up with that spelling, mate. You'll have to forgive me. And I'm also joined by Erik Ellison.
All right there, Rory. How you doing?
I'm good. Nice to meet you guys. Obviously, our listeners won't be able to see, but they are wearing their red and black Inverness Thistle kits. Eric's got one of the newer kits on, whereas Robbie has one of the older kits. I mean, that is the giveaway. We are going to be talking everything about Inverness Thistle, but what might be surprising to some of our listeners is it's not just going to be about the history of the former club Inverness Thistle, it's also going to be about the new Inverness Thistle, who were founded last year and are now going to be competing for the first time in, well, it's a Scottish pyramid, but I still call them the junior leagues. That's what they're kind of culturally known as, but they're going to be competing again in the Scottish pyramid. I believe the first time a club using the name Inverness Thistle has actually competed in the pyramid since the merger, which is really important for a number of reasons. And obviously, being a heritage podcast, those are the things that we're going to be jumping into today. But it's going to be a bit of a celebration about the old club and the new. Inverness Thistle are a really fascinating football team. There's an article written by Ian Barr on our website that talks about their 3-0 victory over Kilmarnock in the Scottish Cup a few years ago now. And that was written from the perspective of a Kilmarnock fan. We'll put a link to it in our show notes if you want to go and check that out. Just before we kick things off properly though, Robbie, first of all, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Hello, yes, so I was a Inverness Thistle fan in my youth, back in the 1980s, and then up to the merger at the end of 93-94 season, which was bitterly contested by the youth and fans of Inverness at the time. Since then, I kept watching football, kept watching local football, other Highland League clubs such as Inverness Thistle and Caledonian. Also travelled for 20 odd years down to Cowden Beef to Central Park to watch the Blue Brazil play. I've still got a fondness for them. But when the chance came to reform Inverness Thistle, I jumped at it because at heart, I was always a Thistle fan. There was a lot of people in a very similar situation who never followed the new team and either were watching different teams or drifted away from football.
Yeah, you've raised a couple of really important points there. The first one being the continued support for Thistle despite this merger club from Thistle and Caledonian, your historic rivals, coming into existence, but also continuing to enjoy football elsewhere as well, which is really important. Erik, your turn. Tell our listeners a little bit about you and what you do.
My name is Erik and I'm on the Jags committee. And like Robbie, as soon as the chance to get the Jags back together came up, the heartstrings were pulled. The opportunity came in and I'm in. I was a fan of the former club, and obviously through the 80s, when it did what I did see the likes of the Killie game, some good nights with the Celtic as well, in the Jags Park, some lovely nights in the old tin shed, which is great, and just some fantastic memories of, and dare I say it, jumping down McEwen Drive and jumping over the fence and stuff. There's so many memories tied in with that, but not just for me, but for other friends and family that are associated with the club as well. So, as I say, when it came to last year, same as Robbie, I got a shout from Russell Hepburn, who wrote, as I say earlier, the book Upcrown Boys. Due respect to Russell, he was on the committee as well, and I got a chance to join up. So here we are today, building something which is absolutely fantastic, with a nod to the past, but a firm eye on the future.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree with you there. First of all, I think since I saw the club founding, as I was saying to you off air, Erik, you see some people founding football clubs and essentially taking the name of a former club. They say, I'll take Third Lanark's name because it means people will come along. I'll take Wanderer's name because it means we'll sell jerseys, and it's done semi-maliciously. I think it would be fair to say it's not entirely true to the name or true to the project that they might think they have in mind. But with Inverness Thistle, I have been particularly impressed with how serious it's been, because a lot of clubs can fall into the trap of, okay, we're going to refound the club, we're going to bring it back and people will come back, but it doesn't always work out for many reasons because they miss a step. But the way that the new Thistle have actually went about everything from their transfer business, their social media marketing, and capturing everything that Inverness Thistle is and what the club meant, it's been fantastic, which is why I was so excited to do this podcast, because I know that this isn't just a case of another club that's going to come and go within a couple of years because it's been some failed vanity attempt. You guys are here for the long term and you're taking it seriously.
I think it's one of those ones where we're here for the long haul. People would probably love us to go away, but we're not going.
Exactly, and that's part of what we're going to be talking about today. And I think the best place to start would be at the very beginning, which is with the old club. Well, actually, let's start off with something quite important. And I think a lot of people of my generation, where the merger predates us, maybe take for granted the fact that football teams from the Highlands weren't staples within the top flight of Scottish football for a very, very long time. And I think talking about this difference between football in the Highlands and football in the Lowlands is quite important. It's a completely different culture to how we experience football, particularly the level that's played, and it's still kind of evident at the moment. So for a very long time, you guys would have followed what would have been the Highland League and just a Highland League club. I say just a Highland League club. I don't mean it as condescendingly as that, but it's a little bit different to how people in my neck of the woods down in Lanarkshire would have experienced football.
Absolutely, and I think it's important to remember you talked about Highland League clubs coming up the pyramid, whether it be Elgin City, Ross County, and you have a team, Fraserburgh, Peterhead and so on, who got there on merit. Well, most of them did. But when we were watching football, there was no pyramid system. So if you were champions of the Highland League, there was nowhere to go. And the only way to get into the Scottish League was by invitation. Inverness Thistle had attempted to get in, and I think it was 74-75 season, and had been pipped by the post, ironically, by Ferranti Thistle, who went on to become Middlebank, who in turn were then murdered by Livingston later in their life. And there was that remoteness. We didn't even automatically qualify for the Scottish Cup. It was only the 4 best teams in the qualifying cup, the semi-finalists, would go into the Scottish Cup and have a Scottish Cup run. But Highland League clubs made their mark. They actually changed the rules in the 1960s after I think Dundee had been beaten in the Scottish Cup. They changed what level the Highland League clubs would enter into because they didn't like that competitiveness. Culturally, I would also say, I don't know if Erik agrees with this, because it was pre-internet, quite often a lot of people would have a Highland League club they would support, and they might have a Scottish League club, and because they watch Football Focus and see it in Gravesy, they might have an English club as well.
I do agree with that, and a lot of Jags fans that I know are, well, in the main, a lot of them are Celtic fans, Aberdeen fans, stuff like that, you know. And given we've got a good history with Celtic as well, playing them a few games. Obviously, they have our local rivals at the time, the likes of Cali and Clachnacudden, and then you had the likes of Nairn County, and then you had the wonderful Elgin City. We had good times with them, Lossiemouth and up Bucky Thistle and all that kind of thing. So this is the area where the merger taking away a lot of that from people. You know, you've got a lot of social connection involved in football that people, you know, if you're not going to the game on Saturday, what are you doing? That's where we're in a position now to bring that back for people. Bring that, the name of Inverness Thistle back, but give also people back to the community and give the fans something to cheer on again. And it's fantastic to see the likes of the training. I'm actually in Belfast, but I'm going up on Friday to meet Robbie and the guys, and I'm going to watch the Clack game. An emotional time. I'm not even joking. To see the pictures of them training, and then last week to see them actually stepping over a pitch.
That's it. But you're right, though. It is an emotional time. It's great to see all these things coming back. And this is the thing, because at the time of recording, we are recording a week after we released our podcast episode on Morecambe, whose supporters still don't know if the club is going to be in existence past tomorrow, next week, you know, whenever. This is part of what the merger done, but where Morecambe, you know, Morecambe's story is one that we've seen many times before, where a rogue owner gets in charge and drives the club to financial ruin. The story of Inverness Thistle and Caledonian as well, it's a little bit worse in my opinion just because of how it happened, but we'll touch on that because the old club as well has such a brilliant history. Following the club within the Highland League, obviously they were a staple of the Highland League more or less forever. They were a pretty successful club within the Highland League as well, obviously contested derbies with Clachnacudden, with Caledonian FC, and of course, as I've already alluded to, gave you some great memories like that 3-0 win over Kilmarnock, which wasn't just a smash and grab like so many cup shocks are. It was a genuine dominating performance and must have given you guys some great memories.
Absolutely. The Kilmarnock game itself, I mean, obviously several years ago now, 84, 85, and it went on to be the springboard down to Parkhead to play Celtic. But the Kilmarnock game itself, you know, we'd already beaten Spartans. So it's back to what I said already. We had to qualify for the Scottish Cup. My memory of it is, well, because I was youthful, I wasn't that surprised we beat Killie. You know, I thought we would, you know, youthful arrogance. And ironically, looking back on it, at the time, Thistle were having a dreadful season. They weren't having a good league season at all, but they were doing very well in the Scottish Cup. And the game itself was just incredible. I packed out Kings Mills. I remember going behind the goals, which was just a grass verge for the last goal. It was fantastic. My only regret was being a young loon. Somebody offered me £5 for my programme at the end of the game, which was a lot of money in 1985. I sold it. Thought I got a great deal.
Amazing. Yeah, no, it's incredible. So, I mean, give myself and our listeners a little bit of an idea of what it was like following the club in the Highland League, because the Highland League, I should say as well, a big shout out to Graham Giles, who has just recently released a book on his journey through the Highland League with his son, which is a really good taste of how it is. So for our listeners who don't know, in 2025, the Highland League and the Lowland League are Scotland's Tier 5. They operate at the same level of the pyramid, and the champions of each league effectively go on to contest a playoff. They then contest a playoff with Club 42 in Scotland's League 2 in the professional setup to then see if they can get promoted. So there's still a big bottleneck. The Lowland League has seen some historic clubs fall into it recently, like Albion Rovers, Cowdenbeath you mentioned earlier, Robert. But the Highland League has a really extensive and rich history that often gets ignored because it's often, it's the Highland and Lowland League. But we need to remember that the Highland League was a completely separate beast of its own back in the day. So what was it like following the club in the Highland League?
I can't be drawn on these facts. Listen, I'll just generically say there were some fun days away, really good interactions with the fans, a great spirit on the likes of maybe going through the likes of Forest or Elgin on the train, great camaraderie. Once again, I'll always go back to the friendships I've made in those days. I mean, we all went to the same kind of school. I went to Milburn with a load of lads and stuff like that, and we'd always follow the Jags. And then from that, you follow them as you get older and so on and so forth. And then those friendships continue on. And to this day, there's still friendships there. What was it like? It was absolute madness, absolutely wonderful, absolutely beautiful. And are we going to do it again? Yeah, we're going to do it again. Absolutely. We've got a really good fan base now. Again, we've got about 2,500 followers, which for a club that's only been going for a year isn't that bad, to be fair. So just to give you, I was just a rough flavour. Did I have fun? Yeah, I did a lot of long hair. I had long hair like you then as well. But yeah, Robbie can give you some more information. He's obviously well travelled himself.
Yeah, so obviously you're watching your home games at Kings Mills, and I think that was a great experience. I used to love how you used to be in the tin shed, which was covered terracing, and we used to sing our chants, "Ooh to be a jaggy," and it used to echo off opposite stand, and you get the echo reverberating back, and it was so close to the players. They heard every chant, every
personal insult,
Yep. We even had one of our colleagues who helps run the website, Andrew. He used to be a linesman, and he was a Thistle supporter, so he always used to get a lot of stick when he came to Kings Mills. But the away days, I think, as Erik mentioned, were fantastic. Generally, there wasn't many going through. A lot of it, the people who were going through, however, young and foolish and making a lot of noise, generally going through in a car together, so some poor sod had to drive, and you'd go along, meet up, and have a lot of drink as well, I'm afraid, and support your team, sing your hearts out. Occasionally, some people would go by the team buses, but I never did. We always made our own way there.
Yeah, I went on the train once. There was about a good squad of us, and we didn't get back on the train, funnily enough. We had to walk we got picked up by one of my friend's parents on the road back from there. It was all part of the fun, all part of growing up, and it's given us a love for where we are today. And as Robbie says about the tin shed and stuff like that, you couldn't not remember that. And as I was saying to you earlier about going in, sometimes I used to go in round the back of McEwen Drive and jump over the back.
I lived at McEwen Drive. Through my garden you were in.
What might you be? I was at Martin Thompson's place, and then you jump in. Anyway, but yeah, the actual rivalry, because the fans were so close in that tin shed, the interactions were very positive.
I can imagine. I mean, this is a thing. We've all been there. We've all done these things. These things happen quite frequently, but it's amazing hearing you talk about, the names of the drives and roads you used to jump down to get home and stuff like that. Like, that's something that only means something to you guys, and this is part of what these personal heritages are all about, and they're tied to the club. But you mentioned a really important point there, Erik. There's a lot going on within the Highland League at this time, and if we count in the current Inverness Thistle has been a continuation of the old club, then there are no less than 10 clubs that have come and went from Inverness, which, if you think about it in this day and age in Scottish football in 2025, having the notion of there being one club playing at the same level or more than one club playing at the same level in Inverness is completely nuts. It's not something that you tend to think about happening. Obviously, you guys are hoping that that's not going to be the case for very long, but it's something that was actually incredibly common back then. I mean, if you think about it, off the top of my head, you would have had Thistle, you would have had Clacknacudden, you would have had Caledonian playing at the same level in the Highland League. I could be missing more. I mean, there was Loch Ness there for a while as well. They're sadly no longer with us. But there's been a number of clubs that have come and went from Inverness. It's not uncommon for Inverness to be a 2-club or more city.
It's not uncommon at all. We keep hearing this sound bites. Oh, it's not big enough for 3 clubs.
Inverness is one of the biggest growing city in Britain at the moment. The idea that it can't support a Scottish League side, a higher league side, and a team in the tier below, it's just nonsensical, you know. Look at Fife, Tayside, the amount of teams that are in there in the East of Scotland League or the West of Scotland League as well. But the density to population is far higher. So I don't buy into this idea that, say we draw 300 people to our first game, how that's going to cripple another team in Inverness. You know, there's enough people in Inverness, and the point being, a lot of people who come to watch Inverness Thistle were not watching ICT anyway. Let's be brutally honest. Most Thistle fans, they drifted away from football, and some went to watch Ross County, Caledonian, but only a minority went to see ICT. And Erik made the point, I think I touched upon as well, a lot of the people who were watching away games and were really keen on the teams back in the 1990s, that's 30 years on. So they're all now in their 50s. So the people who maybe were for the merger, that generation, a lot of them have sadly passed on. You know what I mean? So the people who remember Inverness Thistle would have been in their teens, 20s and so on, and are likely to be against it at the time.
Yeah, and the thing is, one other point, and I think some people maybe look at it as a commercial aspect, we're not a commercial entity. We're not here to make money. We're here to make money to put back into the club.
Yeah, so Rory, you touched upon some other clubs as well, which have been ill-intent or seen as a vehicle for selling merchandise. I've seen rumours like that on forums, and a lot of time we couldn't respond to it because what we were doing was confidential. We're putting in applications to the North Caledonian League, but absolutely not the case. And we've proven that. We've got a ground, we've got a team, and we've got a brilliant management structure, a really supportive committee. We're putting a membership in place, the Kingsmills Club, which will be 1 member, 1 vote, and it's going to be run by the fans, for the fans.
Democratic. I think this idea of bringing the club back and the objectives that you had kind of leads me nicely on to what I was going to ask you guys next. And I think it's quite obvious, but obviously, you know, like you said, Robert, it's farcical to think that one area can't hold more than one football club, but it's sadly a bit of a byproduct in how we think. I could drive from my house for 10 minutes and go round in a circle, and I would come across 8 football teams, all with huge support bases for their communities, all with really thriving communities around them, and all with really unique and distinct identities. And that's not uncommon for anyone else in this country. But I want you guys to tell me and our listeners, because this is a good learning experience for me as well. What did Inverness Thistle mean to the community that it came from? What was the community that it came from? What was the identity of the club?
Well, obviously, Inverness, when I was growing up, had 3 clubs. Caledonian, which played in South Keswick, were very much a local team. And then we had Caledonian, who played on the west of the river, and then the east of the river was Thistle. So, I mean, it wasn't absolute, but there was a divide there. So different people in different schools would support predominantly a team there. So I went to Melbourne Academy. Nearly everybody there supported Inverness Thistle. So it was a local community. Also, at the Crown, where the original ground was based, Kingsmills, there was also a thriving commercial community. So there's pubs, and there's still pubs there now. So people would go to the pub beforehand, gather, go to the game, and then come back. So as Erik touched upon, it was very much also a social activity, you know.
And then similar to myself, I think, you know, I went to Milburn, from Hilton, lots of players from the Hilton area, Jags fans, Jags players, etc. So community-wise, we were on a different side of the city. Culturally, maybe a little bit different as well. Well, we were a bit more trendier than they were, let's just say that.
Yeah, well, obviously you contested a very fierce rivalry with Caledonian.
Yeah, I think I've still got a scar on my head, actually, to be honest. Yeah, they were quite contested, you know, but I think one thing we'll go into, obviously, with the merger, you know, in the likes of the 87, 88, 89 and the 90, I think the catalyst for the whole merger were Jags and the success that we had, you know, in the Cup and then Celtic and stuff like that. And then culturally, the world kind of changed also. There was obviously that backdrop of the football casual area and stuff like that, and a little bit of rivalry with regards to Cali and Jags had their own sets of fans and different things like that. But what was the rivalry like? It was quite tense, shall we say. I've met a few people on late night buses and we had some strong words sometimes, and it was. But ultimately, you know, at the end, the amalgamation did drive friendships through as well. Because as I say, the landscape changed before then on that kind of scene.
I should say culturally, obviously, it was pre-internet. I think you mentioned like Morecambe and Phoenix clubs in England. A lot of them can easily organise their fans through the power of the internet. We didn't really have that, but what we did have in the late 80s was a thriving fanzine culture. So we had red and black all over, out in there, a Thistle fanzine. And to be fair, there was a Cali fanzine as well on our life support machine. Both fanzines were very much run by young fans, and they were a thorn in the side of the establishment, but the older generation of the club. And one of the things, I know you want to talk about the merger, when that came about, initially they said the merger is for the youth of Inverness. This is for your future. Then it became very apparent the youth of Inverness was saying, we don't want it. And we got rid of that kind of motto very quickly, because the merger, to my mind, was just about money and self-interest.
One thing as well I would like to make a point on, they didn't bring people on that journey with them. Why not name the team maybe Inverness City or Inverness United, or, do you know what I mean? They tried to appeal the fans, but then they didn't appease them in any shape or form. In fact, quite the bloody contrary what they did. Still to this day, in fact, cynically, Inverness Caledonian Thistle a couple of years back cynically took out a red and black top, which I thought was the most laughable thing I'd seen in my life.
So I'm gonna dive into some heritage stuff here, because ICT is actually quite a good case study, because on the face of it, you're looking at a football club that, again, on the face of it, let me emphasise that, you're looking at a football club who takes the two clubs that it merged to become and is paying homage to them by using the name and, like you said, Erik, bringing out a red and black kit. But actually, you dive below the face of it, this was a deeply unpopular thing that happened at a time. It didn't appease anyone in what they'd done, and as Robert has already touched on, a number of Thistle fans and Caledonian fans refused to support the club, because at the end of the day, what you're doing is taking two clubs with very distinct identities, two very distinct fan bases, who are also city rivals, and merging them together. It was discussed when, I can't remember the guy's name, but when it was mooted that Hearts and Hibs should merge, there was outrage, there was outcry. And why?
Wallace Mercer.
That's it, Wallace Mercer. And it's like, why wasn't... Well, there was this same kind of outcry for Inverness, Thistle and Caledonian, but there wasn't almost as much emphasis put on it in the media, which is completely crazy. So, you know, for our listeners, 1994 rolls around, and I believe the context of this was a place had opened up within the Scottish Football League for a club to be elected. Inverness Thistle and Caledonian both wanted to go for it, or there was league expansion and spots would open up. But the thinking, in air quotes at the time, was that two clubs from Inverness wouldn't be granted spots, and so there could only be one. And so it was mooted that the clubs would merge together to create Inverness Caledonian Thistle, the club that are just about alive today. They would therefore take the place. And the argument was, by combining the resources and players of both clubs, it would be a success. But like you said, it was more for money. It was more for a grab at success by sacrificing the identities of both those clubs. And I mean, the fan opinion at the time and the reaction to the merger was deeply, deeply unpopular.
Yeah, and I think if even Cali fans, if they're shouted this as well, I know we're on about our club and so on and so forth. There's a lot of Cali fans still to this day that are on Facebook and forums and so on and so forth. We're still feeling that pain.
Absolutely, I'll echo what Erik says. I mean, I personally know Caledonian fans who never went to watch the new Team ICT. And initially, when this was sprung upon the unsuspecting population of Inverness, it was the young Caledonian fans, give them a due, likes of Alan Douglas and their colleagues, they organised very quickly against it. Because what happened, and this is quite cynical, both Inverness Thistle and Caledonian were member clubs, right? And you got your membership by being a season ticket holder. My take of it, in the time when this happened, 93, 94, most people who watched Highland League football did not own a season ticket. You just went along and paid at the gate with cash, okay? There wasn't the culture of, like there is now, to buy your season ticket online and such. So what they did was both Inverness Thistle and Caledonian froze their memberships, so people couldn't buy members. So a lot of fans were excluded. Whereas Ross County, who are a team from Dingwall, who very luckily for them had a really good Scottish Cup run that year, what they did was they balloted the fans at a game, a home game, didn't announce it, just you turned up at a home game, a Highland League game, and they balloted the fans saying, do you wish to apply for the Highland League? Now, that never happened in Inverness because they knew they couldn't guarantee carrying the fan base with them. The only attempt they had with it was the local paper, Inverness Courier. They run a front page poll And the Courier was very much intertwined with the merger. It was all very incestuous. They did a front page poll, vote yes or no, cut out your little coupon, send it back yes or no to the offices of the Inverness Courier, whether or not you're in favour. Now, they obviously expected a mammoth yes, but what actually happened was that of the people who bothered to return their coupon, I think about 99% of people said no. So the next week, we just had a tiny little box, saying like, this is the results. Because I always thought in Inverness, in 93, 94, the vast majority of Invernessians who didn't know about football, didn't care about football, didn't go to football, yeah, they thought it was a good idea. Why not? But it was actual people who went to the games, they were against it.
It's an interesting dynamic to actually think about that as well. Probably one of the most damaging things about the merger was Kings Mills and Telford Street Park as well no longer exist. And that's huge because not only are you losing your football club, but you're also losing the place where you made all of these formative memories and what is and was such a core part of the club. And yeah, I mean, like that, well, until 2024, Inverness Thistle ceased to exist, which was incredibly sad. And, there's actually quite a lot of good documentaries and many documentaries out there on YouTube and other websites that our listeners can go and watch, and which we will link to, so that you can see the actual impact of what it was to lose a football club in this way. I think sometimes it's a bit different when you know the writings on the wall and your club is facing financial annihilation. It's completely different when members of the population of the city in which you come from sell your football club out in that way, especially when it leads to something that completely erases what your football club was.
And what actually was very ironic, in the seasons afterwards, you talked about what they took from the clubs financially. Well, I think it was more that they needed only one team into the league. That's what the Scottish Football League at the time wanted, or hinted they wanted. But, financially, very soon afterwards, ICT were in deep financial crisis and had to be bailed out by the council. So in actual fact, they didn't get much money. The money they got from Thistle was just subsumed in debt. And also, player-wise, with the exception of maybe like the goalkeeper, Jim Cogda, they didn't really take any of the Thistle players into the new club at all. And most of the Thistle team went with our manager to Fort William, which ironically, again, they play in Tier 6 with us this season. And we'll be playing them the week after next, I think, in a friendly.
Oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's cool. I mean, you're right, though. It's like when these things happen, they're all said, we're doing this for the good of the place that we're from and stuff, and it never ends up transpiring. And people need to remember, again, people that are the same age as me, that it may seem to us like Inverness, Caledonian Thistle have been around for a very long time, but in actuality, if you look at them from the perspective of, maybe looking at history, they haven't. You're talking 31 years. That's not a very long time in football. And to be completely honest, and this isn't a slight against Inverness supporters, it's not a slight against the club, but I think given how many times they have been in financial crisis and actually had to be helped in serious ways, in my opinion, the merger has failed because they've not been able to sustain themselves in a way that's actually been beneficial to the club, the supporters, or the city.
I would totally agree. I think you can maybe contrast and compare to Ross County, who are far more heavily involved in community and youth setup as well. And I've managed to appeal to the entire Ross and Cromarty region and get people from all across the Highlands going to watch them, which I think, for whatever reason, ICT didn't seem that bothered to do.
They didn't take the city on, well, they took part of the city on a journey, but a lot of it they did not. And they failed in a lot of ways, let's just say that. And I believe what we're offering is a complete alternative to what they're doing. Ours is fan-based, fan-owned, and it's about the community, genuinely. And we're actually, as just a quick one, I'll quickly touch on this right now, and it would be the Kings Mills Club, which will be launching soon, where we recognise that people right now are pretty much struggling, yeah. But we're also a club in the community, so we're launching the one member, one vote, and as part of that, you get a vote in the saying and running of the club, but you also get discounts on local services and businesses right across the city of Inverness, which is absolutely fantastic. So we're giving to the business community, and we're also giving to the people of the city by joining the Kings Mills Club. Whereas other clubs are like, right, we're going to take. Can you give us some sponsorship? Can you give us some money? Can you give us this? We're actually just going to put this money. We've got to put. I get people have got outlays and so on and so forth, but there's ways to do things. And the way that certain people do things, I believe, isn't the right way. And we reject it wholeheartedly. And if you're in Inverness now and you're listening to this and you want to get involved in a club that will help you in your community, you know where we are.
Exactly. It's a really good way of putting it, and it leads us nicely on to the next part of the episode, which is Inverness Thistle 2024. We're going to jump into everything that means. This is the first time that a club using the name Inverness Thistle has competed within the Scottish pyramid since the former club folded, so it's really significant for a number of reasons. And as I said at the beginning of the episode, the reason that I wanted to get you both on the podcast was because this to me didn't look just like another cash grab. It didn't look like another, vain project that some guys wanted to do using a historic name. You're serious about what you're doing, and this is what's important about what you're doing. So, refounded in 2024, tell us all about it.
So yeah, there'd been murmurings before. I mean, I remember talking to Russell Hepburn, who's involved in the fanzine, that was on the committee before, about this. When he launched his book, we were talking about, would it be viable to get a club up again? There'd been an amateur club a few years before as well, trying to do what we did, but obviously not nearly as successfully professionally. And there was a very successful Facebook page, a community of fans, which I think Erik touched upon, but ICT had very cynically seen and did the red and black away top for. So we knew there was a murmur, and it was almost like certain things came at the same time. There was, ICT were going into administration, they were in a bad way, they were utterly removed from the community, there was a lot of bad will. And, Marty Mainland, who's used to play for the amateur club and has a fine history in Highland League and North Caledonian League football, he suggested he got a focus group going with a few fans and said, can we make this a goer? And we had a few initial meetings, and we thought, yeah, let's do this. Let's start fundraising, get the money ready, and get the backroom staff organised before we even think about a football department. Everybody kept asking us that straight away. Who's going to be my manager? Who are you going to sign? But we're trying to get the foundations. And one of the first things we did a race night, which tied in as a reunion for Thistle supporters. And Erik did a very successful long-distance walk up the Great Glen, raised a lot of money. And at that quiz night at the Corrie Garth, it was styled out, and it was quite emotional because there was people there I hadn't seen for 30 odd years, and they'll tell me how deeply upsetting it had been to have their football team ripped away from them, and they'd never gone to support the new team. So for 30 years, they'd never had a football team, and that had been a big part of their life beforehand, and it had just been ripped away from them without any care by the powers that be.
I suppose it's quite important to highlight there's a massive difference between watching football and watching your club.
Exactly.
And let's emphasise that word there, which is your club, because obviously, people that have listened to this show for a long time will know that I quite like going to a lot of our local junior clubs, and just generally going around different grounds and clubs within Scottish football, but regardless of how I feel, and I've been over it a lot about how commercialised Celtic are, that will never beat the feeling of going to watch Celtic for me, because they're my club. They always will be, regardless of whether they're here or not. So I think it's important that we highlight there that for all supporters who have lost a football club, regardless of who you follow now, it will never beat the feeling of you watching your football club. I think that's quite an important point, Robbie.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And then there's a connection, as Robbie says, with the fans. I mean, I remember actually, I think it was Russell came back from Turkey, and then we were chatting. I think we were chatting one night on Facebook, and similarly to Robbie and stuff like that, he's like, "Oh, do you think we can get the old club back?" It sounds a crazy idea, but I don't know, maybe. And then Russell invited me in. He says, "Do you want to get on this?" Where the announcement was made on Facebook, so I reached out and thought, right, what is going on? I need to be in this. From there, we did, as Robbie said, the race night. We obviously got together as a committee. We are probably, we're probably the most dedicated and solid committee of people around that I know that care about what we're doing because of that emotional attachment that you have. Fact is, it's true emotion. When I mentioned at the start, before we started recording, obviously I was saying about the jaunt. The jaunt was an opportunity to highlight that. So the reunion night culminated with the end of the jaunt. So it was like 5 days of walking up the Great Glen. It was a fantastic experience. What I realised on the fifth and final day was that because it was, you're worn out, you're full of emotion. I've been doing videos all day long. And I realised, I was like, hold on a minute, this means more to a lot of people than I understand. One of the reels I remember saying, listen, you can't buy what we've got because you can't. People would love us, as I said to you earlier. People would love nothing more than us to fail. But it was a great walk, and as I say, it was very emotional. But for the fans, when we met that night, and I seen people I hadn't seen, as Robbie said, in about 31 years. People from school, and I'm like, wow, man, I've not seen you since 1992. Do you know what I mean? Just fabulous. And people were going, I can't believe what you're doing. And then people were very thankful and appreciative and also inquisitive. They couldn't believe it was actually happening. It was that, is this actually happening? We're now 1 year and a half, a full year. We finally got accepted after a lot of bloody hard work with it in the background. The lovely SFA Comet system. Robbie dreams about that at night. And, there's lots of work that we're all, to give you a kind of idea, our chat started 5:30 in the morning. They keep going on till about 11, 12 o'clock at night. And it's just because of the dedication of the committee that it's here today. That's really why we're here today, because Robbie, Martin, every single one of them just put their life and soul into this to get it where it is.
Yeah, it's significant though, and I think this is why Inverness Thistle and Inverness in general is, in terms of an in-depth look and study into football, is quite fascinating, particularly from a heritage perspective. But you mentioned your goals there, Erik, and you've kind of touched on some of them already. Sustainability, a presence within the community. What are the other aims, objectives and goals of Inverness Thistle?
We have a real desire. I have a young son who's autistic. Yeah, we want to, in the future, we're going to transform from a sports club to a community interest company, which is one of our big aims and goals. That's probably the next year or two. The other aim would be we want a special educational needs academy to make football inclusive for everybody. So we're all about inclusivity and diversity as well. We do put a lot of money in the community. I mean, for out of that £1,500 or whatever we raised in the race night, we give 50% of it to a charity in Inverness, Mcilwraith from memory. And, everything we do has the community in mind. At Christmas time, we did the 1668 Cafe. We did a kind of toy run and different bits like that. We're about to climb Ben Nevis in 4 weeks, where there might be a little bit of a donation going on back to the community there. We obviously as a club have to raise money to keep ourselves sustainable as well. We've got a race night coming up as well, which there may be some fundraising going on there as well for the club and for people within the community. And then, once again, this Kings Mills Club is probably going to be the biggest thing we've launched for a while. And it's going to be a rolling success. And as I say, I believe that what we're doing is absolutely right, absolutely correct, and it rejects everything that a lot of football clubs do.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely spot on. This is what's quite important about now. You're actually seeing it in a lot of places where people are either reviving or founding clubs for their communities, which are community-centred and are supposed to be, like you said, community interest companies, beneficial for the surrounding area, because the football club that's maybe playing professionally within their community haven't lived up to that standard. They haven't been able to do it, or they simply don't. I know Inverness Caledonian Thistle probably being one of them, but I think what's important as well is that it's like, you've been saying this through the entire episode. People have been coming up to you asking, almost bewildered, almost in disbelief, that Inverness Thistle are actually coming back. And that's something that's really powerful, because it shows that for 30 years people have been waiting on this, that there is an appetite for it, and that the new club are actually going to be carrying the legacy of Inverness Thistle on.
Erik put across very strongly how we're raising funds for both ourselves and the community. But, on the football side, absolutely, we had to get sorted out back room beforehand. But we've had more people come in the committee as well, with a lot of experience in the North Caledonian League. They've been around the coast before. They bring so much to the table, to the experience. And we've also got a really good football set up. We've got a great football department, 2 young managers who are going to be really successful. And we've got a great young squad, which, as Erik alluded to already, have won their first 2 friendlies. So we're not just there to make up numbers. Our aim is to compete in the North Caledonian League. And our first AGM, which was held in that Corrigaff Hotel, the membership said they wanted to be back in Inverness at the very most in within 5 years to have our own ground, somewhere to play in Inverness. Because unfortunately, the availability of stadiums and pitches in Inverness is lacking somewhat. I mean, for a city our size, it's appalling, to be honest.
Well, when I was up in June to see the Alba FA play, the Cornwall FA, and kudos to both of those national teams is what they are, because they're doing an absolutely fantastic thing, and the football match was an incredible cultural exchange. It was my first experience of visiting a football ground in Inverness, and I did look at the possibilities of getting the train up and walking out to it, which I realised was about a 50-minute walk from the city centre. It was out in Canal Park. Lovely setting, lovely ground. Ultimately a rugby pitch, not a football pitch though. Although you can play football in it, though the setup is for rugby and for other sports. And I did get the impression that there is a bit of a lack of adequate football locations within Inverness. But am I right in saying you guys are going to be playing at Ferrybrae Park?
Yes, so it's actually it's in North Keswick, which is just across the Keswick Bridge. Ironically, we're just across the bridge from ICT.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's brilliant that Inverness Thistle are back. It's done so much for people within the city. It's done so much for people in the community. And, you know, the thing is, and I think what is most importantly, is people can stop looking at Inverness Thistle as this tragic afterthought now. The club are back. They have something to look forward to going to. And as I've been saying through this entire recording, there's an appetite for it. You can't ask for much more than that. People have been waiting on this moment, and that's what gives the club a massive drive. This has been a great episode, guys. I think it's great for our listeners to hear about Inverness Thistle, the history of the old club, but also the aims and objectives of the new club as well. Is there anything that you guys want to add just before we finish up for tonight?
Well, I was looking at the notes we had for the meeting, and you said, do we offer an alternative to ICT? There's been a lot of comments on Facebook from, especially, and I understand that, young ICT supporters who have only ever known ICT. I get that. They're ICT supporters. Best of luck to them. That's their team. They're saying, they keep asking, but if ICT didn't exist, there would not have been, would Cali of Thistle have done the same as us? Well, I don't know. That's speculation. That's a big what if. What we can say is, in the present day, we do offer an alternative. If you want to go see grassroots football, played with real heart and passion at Ferrybrae, and be part of something, have real ownership of what's going on, I ask you to come along to Ferrybrae and see the Jags.
Actually, a good heritage discussion point for a lot of these young fans would be, if Inverness Caledonian Thistle didn't exist, who would your club from Inverness be? That's what they should be thinking about. That's what they should be asking their parents. That is heritage, because it's who they come from. It's where they come from.
Well, we've not lost our heritage. We're just rebuilding it. We totally acknowledge our past, and we acknowledge the club across down there. Our history is tied in with it. Our former club's history is tied in with them. However, we're completely different. We're not here to profiteer out of what we're doing. We're here to give something back. And if I was a young fan right now, and I was listening to this podcast, I go, do you know what? They were actually talking sense. I like the sound of that. And as Robbie says, you're more than welcome to come across to Ferrybrae Park, support a team, and get involved. And if you're a young player, hey, you never know.
Spot on. I think that's important as well, though. And like you said off air, Eric, the timing was right, but you didn't found because of Inverness Caledonian Thistle. You're completely separate, and that's what's important about it. But I would urge any of our listeners, whether you're from Scotland, Inverness, further afield, wherever, to try and watch a match at the new Inverness Thistle. Go along and support them. Probably great for the groundhoppers as well. They love it when a new club founds and a new club comes up. Obviously, I wish you guys all the best, and you never know with the Junior Cup and how that's kind of rebranded. Maybe I'll see you down at Moore Park at Lanark United one day. But guys, this has been a fantastic chat. Thank you very much for coming on the show. Thank you very much to all of our listeners as well who have tuned in tonight to listen to this fantastic story. If there's anything that you want us to cover, you can DM us an X, that's @_footyheritage, or you can email us at hello@footballheritage.co.uk as well. If you enjoyed this, leave us a review, because it does wonders for the algorithm in terms of pushing us in front of new listeners. We really appreciate it. But for now, Robbie, say goodbye.
All the best. Thank you very much.
Erik, say goodbye.
All the best. See you soon. Carry on.
And it's goodbye from me as well. We'll see you all again next week. Goodbye.